How do you do? Mr. Bryan Peters feels it would be a little unkind to present this podcast, gravely amusing, without just a word of friendly warning. We are about to unfold an episode from the mind of Bryan Peters, a fan of pop culture who sought to create a podcast after his own image, without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest podcasts ever listened to. It deals with two great fandoms of pop culture, humor, and horror. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such strain, now's your chance to, well, we warned you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gravely Amusing, the only podcast that nailed their Halloween costume this year. I went as a deadbeat dad. I said I would be there for things, and I just never showed up. But it wasn't my fault. 2 days before my wife and I were to leave for vacation, we found out that she was sick. And as soon as she got better, I got sick. So we had to cancel our Halloween vacation. She wasn't able to get back her vacation time. I was unfortunately able to cancel my vacation and keep that time so I can just roll it over to next year, which I guess is good for me. But when you can't vacation with your spouse, it's not as fun if you really like your spouse, which I really like her. So I don't know, maybe that kind of makes me more depressed. I don't know. But I just ended up working from home, sick as a dog. If you can tell from my tone and just how I haven't podcasted in a while to finish up the season of Gravely Amusing, I've just been frustrated, depressed, and I apologize. My buddy Tyler did take me on a road trip, and I got out of the house and was able to go to comic stores. So other than that, I haven't got to do much, but I mostly haven't been able to do a whole lot with my wife, which makes me sad. But anyway, that's not what Gravely Amusing is about. Well, maybe it is because, it's gravely amusing. So it's not very amusing. I don't know, but whatever. So I've kind of been down and I've lost my spooky spirit and I've been going crazy. A little mad, you say. I just might want to lash out. Sorry, I almost lost control there. Almost lost control. Speaking of losing control, let's talk about that classic story of losing oneself. A strange story. A strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. If there's one story other than Frankenstein that I personally have always been intrigued by and loved, it's Jekyll and Hyde all the way. It's why I love the Incredible Hulk so much, because the Incredible Hulk combination of Frankenstein and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it's a perfect combo of those two stories I love so much. So the Hulk is definitely what I love so much. Heck, I mean, you could actually probably even be able to say that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde really influenced superheroes in general, or villains at least, with dual identities. Because with villains, if they have a secret identity, they like Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor is perfect example, because and Kingpin, because everybody, like the general public, thinks they're a good person, thinks they're a good guy, but what they really are like one evil SOB. So Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of originated that also in the good side with superheroes, because Superman having a secret identity of Clark Kent and Superman. I mean, they're both good, but one can do certain things that the other one can't in public, and stuff like that. So me personally, I'm actually been studying more Sigmund Freud, and I studied him in high school a lot because I was intrigued by his research with dreams. And I actually had no idea that he researched or maybe I forgot about it. But I had no idea that he researched personalities. And because me personally, I'm intrigued by the concept that there are two sides of man, one that's completely good and one that's completely evil. Because before I even looked this up, before I even researched Sigmund Freud more, like before I even knew this theory existed, I would go to my friends that I could have deep ass talks with, and I would discuss, mostly Tyler, and I would discuss the duality and the struggles of man. And because I am such a deep thinker, I threw at them that there's really three sides to man or humankind. And this is who they are. Like the three sides of man are basically, in my opinion, and it turns out actually Sigmund Freud's opinion kind of is they're who you are, who you want to be. And that side might be the good or the absolute good you want to be, but then there's the side you don't want to be. That's the most evil. And that actually might be the side that people want to do because they could do what they want. But regardless, I think it's cool that I have these thoughts even before we do this research. So, pat on my back there. I don't get a lot of encouragement in my life, so pat me on the back. I like words of affirmation. It's my love language. So good job, Bryan. But anywho, Sigmund Freud's theory, one of the last he worked on, was basically that we have three voices in our head. We have the ID or the id, the ego, and the super ego. Each of these voices has a different goal. The ID or the id, I'll just say the ID. I like the ID better. The ID seeks pleasure, is what you really want. It's your deepest desires, your deepest impulses, the Mr. Hyde to you, if you will. The superego, or maybe the superhero or whatever, the superego tries to uphold your highest values. It is the Dr. Jekyll in you, the superhero in you, the best you can be, the 100% good version of who you are. And then there's this third side that I feel is very important. There's the ego, and the ego has to deal with both of these sides of you in constant conflict. It has to find a way to operate in this reality. The ego is what you really are. The ego is the balance of how you handle society and your impulses. Maybe you do act on impulses a little bit, but you have to, you keep yourself in check. So the ID and the superego is constantly in this battle of who you are, which just, which is hence your ego. Freud would work on these theories and until in 1938, which was just before his death. So Freud, or as he likes to be called, Z, would work on those a little bit before he died. And I'm so intrigued by these theories and thoughts that, and stay tuned with me, everybody, because um, because I'm working on a comic book. I'm working on one, and it's something very special to me. And hopefully I'll publish it one day if I can find an artist that who actually wants to work with me. But my comic, and I have this kind of whole comic universe and epic, but the one in particular here, it's called Alter, spelled Alter. Copyright Manchild Productions, Manchild Comics. That's this is my idea. So if anybody else takes it, I'll know. But Alter, Alter, means change. To alter something. But also, alter can be spelled Altar. And sometimes as I write, I will switch those words up. So if you kind of can see where I'm going. I've been working on this for 20 something years. I actually worked on it originally, sharing my ideas with Finch. And, don't forget to listen to the BP and the Finch podcast that we've been working on with Jure Finch, my good friend. And this alter will be part of a whole big comic universe I've been working on. But I have an imposter syndrome, And it's one of my greatest desires to publish it one day, but we'll see. Hopefully one day. So who wrote this book? Who wrote The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? Well, it was actually a guy named Robert Louis Stevenson, and he was Scottish. He is from Edinburgh, Scotland. I can't do voices as good as my buddy Trey, but I try. But he wrote many awesome stories, Kidnapped, and a bunch of other stuff. But he also wrote that I know people have heard of is Treasure Island. So he wrote Treasure Island, and he wrote this. So what's the deal with Stevenson? So Stevenson was born at Gate Howard Place in Edinburgh, Scotland, where I hope one day I can visit with my wife. I pray to the Lord. He was born on November 13th, which is when I should have actually published this podcast. I meant to publish it last week, but darn you, Bryan. But he was born November 13th, 1850, to Thomas Stevenson, who was a lighthouse designer, and his wife, Margaret Isabella Balfour. He was Christian Robert Louis Balfour Stevenson, and at 18, he changed the spelling of Lewis, Lewis, to Louis, and he dropped Balfour in 1873. So Robert's father and his father and his father and his father and his father, they were all lighthouse dudes. They were all lighthouse engineers and designers. So Robert's grandfather, Louis Balfour, and his daughter, which is Robert's mom, they both had weak lungs. So they often needed to stay in warmer climates for their health. Stevenson inherited a tendency to these coughs and fevers. And whenever the family moved to a damp, chilly house, these would act up. But when the family moved to sunnier places, he would be much better. The tendency to extreme sickness in winter would remain with him until he was 11. Illness was a recurring feature of his adult life, and it left him extraordinarily thin. Some people thought that he had tuberculosis, but more recent views that it was like a constant bronchitis or an other infection in the lungs that somehow got passed down by the family. Very weird. But Stevenson's parents were both serious Presbyterians, and Stevenson actually had a nurse named Allison Cunningham, who they called Cummy. I don't know why any woman would want that nickname, but yeah, sure. And the nurse gave him a mix of Calvinism and also folklore beliefs, and these were early source of nightmares for young Robert. And at this time, he showed a serious concern for religion and religion's ways as he was brought up in this house. But she cared for him so tenderly in all his sickness, often reading him stories and other stories from the Bible and folklore and stuff, that Robert became very interested in stories. And being a sick kid and having to get tutors and being in and out of school, this made life really rough for him. So he actually didn't learn to read, even though he loved stories so much. He didn't learn to read until he was actually 8 years old. So that was pretty crazy. When he was older, though, he told his dad he didn't want to work on lighthouses. So he didn't want to be Aquaman and live in a lighthouse. His dad was very supportive of that and actually helped him publish his first book. Robert's father actually wanted to be a writer as well, and his father didn't support him, so he didn't want to do that to his son. He wanted to have the cycle be broken and help his son out. So, in other respects, besides going writing, Stevenson was moving away from his upbringing. His dress started becoming more liberal. He wore his hair long. He wore long coats, long jackets. He didn't attend parties in fancy dress. Within the limits of a strict allowance, which I guess came from his family, He visited cheap pubs and brothels. So you can see here how this might have influenced Jekyll and Hyde, where Jekyll would have been that devout Christian, that man that was above reproach, and then Hyde is where who he really was. Like, he wanted to be more liberal, like he wanted to hang in brothels, he wanted to be in bars. So I could see that conflict of and how he wrote. And more significantly, Robert started rejecting Christianity, and he declares himself an atheist. And in January 1873, when he was 22, his father came across the Liberty, Justice, and Reverence Club, or the LJR, of which Stevenson and his cousin Bob were both members. And their slogan of this club was basically, let's just forget everything our parents have taught us. Let's disregard it. And questioning his son about his beliefs, Robert's dad, I think he discovered the truth about Robert, that he no longer believed in God and grown tired of pretending to be something that he wasn't. And Robert said to him, like, am I supposed to live my whole life in falsehood? And his father was basically no longer proud of him. So his father actually was so devastated, he said to his son, "You've rendered my whole life a failure." And his mother said that this was the heaviest affliction to befall her. So if some of your parents are overly religious, and you have started to question religion or faith in general, or you just have questions about it, I can understand where your parents are very upset with you to ask questions. Religion is not necessarily always made for you to ask questions. It's part of why I got in trouble in Bible college. I asked a lot of questions of why things were a certain way, and they didn't like me there. But when I was in ministry, that was a big part of my ministry. Is I wanted people to ask questions. I wanted us to have a discussion about God and about Jesus, and about beliefs, because I believe that that's how people grow. I have believed that that's how the relationship kind of really begins. If you ask questions and you have doubts with things, but yet you still believe, and you still believe in God. I guess that's kind of where real faith begins. And I would never want to judge somebody for asking questions. I want them to do. I want them to become their best self. That's all what I was about. So that's me. So Stephen's rejection of Presbyterian Church and Christian dogma didn't turn into lifelong atheism or agnosticism, because he eventually wrote to his father about 5 years after this, and said to him, Christianity is among other things a very wise, noble, and strange doctrine of life. You see, I speak of it as a doctrine of life and as a wisdom for this world. Father, I have a good heart and believe in myself and my fellow men and the God who made us all. There's a fine text in the Bible, I don't know where, to the effect that all things work together for those who love the Lord. Strange as it may seem to you, everything has been, in one way or the other, bringing me nearer to what I think you like me to be. 'Tis a strange world indeed, but there is a manifest God for those who care to look for him. So I think that he believed that there was a God within 5 years, but he probably didn't like all the rules that religion gave him, or how religion told him kind of how he had to live. But he still believed that he was a god. So I guess that would kind of make him like an agnostic, if you will. So whatever. Um, his life isn't too exciting. Robert's life isn't that exciting. He married a writer like himself, but most of his life was basically traveling, looking for warmer climates, and just trying to breathe. A good bit of his ideas for his works were from traveling around the world searching for good climates, writing with his wife. Some ideas he got from just dreams and nightmares he had. But he eventually died in the Isle of Samoa of a stroke on December 3rd, 1884. So let's discuss this book, shall we? Let's discuss the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, what you're here for. So I'd say some of this inspirations for his novel definitely came from his struggling with what his parents wanted to be and what was expected of him. Living his life, trying to make everybody else happy instead of himself happy. So I think, because the character Dr. Jekyll wants to keep his image that he's a good person, but still do what the heck he wants to do. So I think this was a huge inspiration for the Dr. Jekyll character. So, yeah. So Robert, wanted to be a writer. He was a man of ideas. And I personally can't help but be inspired by that. You have to live your life. You can't have others tell you how your life should be. You got to live it the way you want to. I mean, you shouldn't go out and just start killing people and doing drugs or whatever. but you should, if you have dreams to be a writer, go be a writer. If you have dreams to be an artist, go be an artist. If you want to own your own company, go own your own company. This is your life. You only got one life. Go do it. Um, but Robert here was like me, was always intrigued by the nature of good and evil in man. And some inspirations for this book could have came from when he was a teenager. He wanted to write a play based on a man from the 1700s named William Brodie. So if you don't know who William Brodie was, because I sure as heck didn't, William Brodie, this was a big case in the 1700s. This was a big deal. Well, William Brodie was a respectable tradesman and deacon of the Incorporation of Rights, which kind of controlled the craft of cabinet making in Edinburgh, Scotland. And this made him like a man about town, a very important person in town, not unlike Dr. Jekyll. And part of his work as a cabinet maker was to install and repair locks and other security mechanisms for his customers and people in town. So he would socialize with people in town and build cabinets, and he was like a locksmith. He was a locksmith in town. But at night, Brodie would break into houses, and he was a thief. So he used his daytime work to basically gain knowledge about all the security mechanisms of his customers, and he would copy keys to their houses using wax impressions. So if they needed a new key, he would make them a key, and then he would take a key for himself. And that's something I always wondered about locksmiths today. And that's something I need to put my best people on it, because what contracts or things with the law do locksmiths have to do to be able to keep their profession and also not be accused of any crimes or anything? It's interesting. But Brodie was asked to work in the houses of the richest people in Edinburgh. So he gained their trust, and he was their locksmith. But the money he stole from them, he used to basically maintain his second life, which was gambling and secretly 5 children by 2 different women. And the women didn't know of each other, and the women were unknown in the city. But he had 3 with one, and 2 with the other, or maybe he had 4 with one and 1 with the other. Who knows? One of these things is not like the other. So the guy had a double life, and one side he showed to the world, and the other one he kept hidden. Inspiration for this book is also widely believed to be from a personal relationship that Robert had with a French teacher named Eugene Cantrell. Now, Cantrell, this is a weird one. Well, it's not weird. It's just sad, I guess is the word for it. So Eugene Cantrell was convicted and executed for the murder of his wife in 1878. Cantrell, who appeared to have a normal life in the city, poisoned his young wife with opium. According to an author, Jeremy Hodges, Stevenson was present throughout the trial of his friend. And as evidence unfolded, he found himself, like Dr. Jekyll, disgusted before the acts of his friend, or like Dr. Jekyll was disgusted with Hyde, or more so in the book, Mr. Utterson disgusted with the acts of Mr. Hyde and what's going on with Dr. Jekyll. So definitely an interpretation. Yes, this is definitely an interpretation. Moreover, it was believed that the teacher actually committed more murders in France and Britain by poisoning his victims at dinner parties with a favorite dish of toasted cheese and opium. See, I like my toasted cheese or grilled cheese with tomato soup. I don't like it with a bunch of opium. But, to each his own. To each his own. Eugene was about 44 years old, and his wife was actually a student of his, and she was 15 when they met. She was 16 when they got married, and she gave birth 2 months after they were married. She was 16 years old. He was 44. In my opinion, that's disgusting. But this was different times back then. But for a man to be 28 years older than his wife, personally, I don't like it. The unwritten rule among men is half your age plus 7. So he should be dating someone that's about 29, like maximum, or sorry, minimum, minimum 29. Yeah, it's just, it's disgusting. I'm sorry. But whatever. So there reports that basically, that he beat his wife, and he just wanted to kill her. Maybe because she got pregnant. I don't know. This dude was evil. There's no other way to put it. But yeah, so some say Robert was high on cocaine when he wrote Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. There are also reports that basically he was sick while he wrote it, and he would be sick in bed, and he would come down, and after he wrote, and he would show his wife and say, like, what do you think of this? And she would say, well, you should probably write it like this. And he would get pissed off, as I would probably, and crumble the paper into a ball and throw it in the fire. Then he would go and rewrite, come back down, and basically say that she was right. So my wife is a very good writer, and I really hope that she publishes something one day. I know she has imposter syndrome just like I do. But my wife she's an amazing writer. So if I'm writing something and my wife gives her 2 cents and basically says, I could do it better. Yeah, I'd probably be mad at you because I know she's better than me. And that's probably what he was feeling, you know. So, marriage, what are you gonna do? But so the book, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it's written from like a third perspective. So this is where I really believe that the story of Robert, and his friend Eugene, the dude that killed his wife. That's why I believe that's definitely inspiration and a mixture of Robert's own life and the own things he wanted to do. So characters in this book, there's Gabriel John Utterson, and mostly in the book he's just called Utterson. So Utterson is a lawyer, and he's close, basically kind of like the best friend of Dr. Jekyll. And their other friend, so it's Utterson, Jekyll, and another friend named Lanyon. And Utterson is basically uh, he's reserved at all times. He's a motionless bachelor who nonetheless is believable, trustworthy, and basically he's tolerant of other people and how they are. And he's very reserved. He's very logical. He's a very logical man. He's like the Spock of the story, if you will. But he's very likable. But Utterson is not immune to guilt, though, as while he's quick to investigate and judge the faults of others. Well, I guess he's not really tolerant. I'm so sorry, my notes suck. He's quick to investigate things that are suspicious and judge the faults of others, even for the benefit of his friends. Um, he doesn't, yeah. So Utterson doesn't partake in like gossip or other views of upper class out of respect for other people. So Utterson basically is a type of guy that he lets people be people, but when something is out of the ordinary and people aren't doing what they normally do, Utterson jumps to many conclusions before finding out all the facts. He's a very curious guy. He wants to find out all the facts, but it's just who he is. He's a curious guy. So then, of course, there is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and based in Soho, London's West End. So the story it takes place in London. Dr. Jekyll is described as a large, well-made, smooth-faced man of about 50 with he's a handsome guy, but he's like 50. He's old. He's older. Who sometimes feels he's battling between the good and evil within himself, and he's struggling with who he is and who he wants to be. He has desires that he's not able to do. He spent a great deal of his life trying to repress these evil urges. They're not fitting of a man of his of his position. So he creates a serum or potion in an attempt to separate this evil hidden from his personality. And in doing so, Jekyll is transformed into a smaller, younger, cruel, remorseless, and evil Mr. Hyde. Jekyll has many friends, and he's very likable, but as Hyde, he becomes mysterious and violent. As time goes by, Hyde grows in power after taking the potion repeatedly, and eventually, well, I'll get to it when we get into the book. There's also a character named Richard Enfield, and he's really just in kind of like the beginning of the book. He's not in there a whole much, but Enfield is basically Utterson's cousin, and he's a well-known man about town. And I'll get to it. Then there's Dr. Lanson, who is kind of the third friend. He's also a scientist, and he's a friend with Utterson and Dr. Jekyll. Then there's also Mr. Poole. Poole is Jekyll's butler, who's worked for him for many, many years, and he is very loyal to Dr. Jekyll, but he he worries about what's going on. And then there's an inspector, and then there is a character named Sir Danvers Carew, who's a 70-year-old dude, works for Parliament, and we'll see who he is. And then there is a maid that's that works for Jekyll. So this is how the story goes. Okay. So Utterson and his cousin Richard Enfield are on their weekly walk when they reach the door of a large house located by a street in a busy quarter of London. And they're kind of stopping their tracks looking at this door. And Enfield tells Utterson that months ago, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, he saw an evil-looking man named Edward Hyde trample a young girl after accidentally bumping into her. Now, what this little girl was doing out at 3 a.m., I have no freaking clue, but it's so the story can happen. And 3 a.m. is the witching hour. It's the evil hour. So there are going to be a lot of questions you may have about this book. If you choose to read it yourself, which I recommend, even though I tell you everything that happens. But there's just a lot of questions. And feel free to message me on Facebook at Gravely Amusing, Instagram at Gravely Amusing, and even X at Gravely Amusing. I would love to hear your thoughts about this book because there's so many questions. So, we'll see. So this kid gets trampled, and Enfield forces Hyde to pay the family. So the girl's family shows up. Enfield kind of stops Hyde from running away and makes him pay the family $100 to avoid the scandal. So Hyde brings Enfield to this very door that they're looking at. And Hyde goes in and comes out and writes a check signed by Dr. Henry Jekyll and gives the $100 to the family. Well, Dr. Jekyll is a very respected member of the community and is doctor and he's Utterson's best friend and client. So, it's Enfield Utterson knows this dude. So Utterson fears this Hyde dude is blackmailing his best friend. And it turns out that Jekyll recently changed his will with Utterson to make Hyde the sole beneficiary of the event in the event of Jekyll's death or disappearance. Notice how it says disappearance. So if he were to become Hyde completely, Hyde gets the money. Oh, excuse me. Utterson then tries to discuss Hyde with Jekyll, but Jekyll gets very defensive. Utterson then tries to discuss Hyde with Jekyll, but Jekyll gets very defensive and says he can't get rid of Hyde when he wants, and asks him to drop the subject. So a year passes, and in October, a servant sees Mr. Hyde beat Sir Danvers with a cane to death, and the cane breaks in half. It's never explained why Hyde kills this dude, but the dude had a letter to Utterson with him. So something was supposed to be told to Utterson, something. We never find out what it said or why he killed this dude, which bothers the crap out of me. But, anywho, the police contact Utterson, who then leads officers to Hyde's apartment, but Hyde's not there. Hyde's vanished. But they do find the other half of a broken cane, which Utterson recognizes as the one he gave to Jekyll as a gift. So why would Hyde have Jekyll's cane? Well, Utterson visits Jekyll, who has a note supposedly written to Jekyll, to Jekyll by Mr. Hyde, apologizing for the trouble he's caused. However, Hyde's handwriting is similar to Jekyll's own handwriting. It's just a little bit more aggressive. So this leads Utterson to conclude that Jekyll forged the note to protect Hyde for whatever reason. And then for the next 2 months, Jekyll reverts to his former sociable manner. But in January, he starts refusing visitors and he locks himself away in his laboratory. So Dr. Lanyon, the third friend, he out of nowhere dies of shock after receiving some information about Dr. Jekyll. But before his death, Lanyon gives Utterson a letter to be opened after Jekyll disappears or Jekyll dies. So in late February, during another walk with Enfield, our boy Utterson starts a conversation with Jekyll. They decide to go and walk by the courtyard of the house to see if they can see Jekyll in the window. And they do. And they start this conversation with Jekyll at his window. And Jekyll speaks with them for a bit, but then suddenly he slams the window shut and he disappears, which shocks and concerns Utterson. What's my best pal doing? What the hell? Then in early March, Jekyll's butler, Mr. Poole, visits Utterson and says Jekyll has secluded himself in the laboratory for weeks. Utterson and Poole break into this laboratory, and they find Hyde's body wearing Jekyll's clothes, apparently having killed himself. They find a letter from Jekyll to Utterson, and Utterson reads Lanyon's letter that he had before, because Jekyll's dead. Remember, Jekyll's dead. So he reads Lanyon's letter before he reads Jekyll's. So in Lanyon's letter, it reveals that his deterioration in health resulted from the shock of seeing Hyde drink a serum that turned him into Jekyll. So in the book, basically, Mr. Hyde or Dr. Jekyll has a letter, gives a letter to Lanyon, and the letter says that I need you to go in my house. I need you to get these vials and the serums from a drawer, and a man's going to come pick them up at midnight, and you're going to give it to him. Well, that man's Mr. Hyde. So Mr. Hyde comes in, and sees Jekyll Hyde turn into Jekyll. So, so he dies from the shock of seeing Hyde drink the serum, and that turns into Jekyll. Jekyll's letter explains the whole story. He says that he held himself to strict moral standards publicly, but he indulged in unstated vices and struggled with shame. He found a way to transform himself and thereby indulge his vices without fear of detection. Jekyll's transformed body, Hyde, was evil, self-indulgent, and uncaring to anyone but himself. Initially, Jekyll controlled the transformations with that serum, but one night in August, he became Hyde involuntarily in his sleep. Jekyll resolved to cease becoming Hyde forever. Despite this, one night he had a moment of weakness, and he drank the serum. He drank the serum. Ugh. Hyde, with his desires, been caged for many, many months. Kills this Carew guy, to be cool. Horrified at this, Jekyll tried more adamantly to stop the transformations. And in January, he transformed involuntarily while he was awake. And he was far from his laboratory, and he was hunted by the police as a murderer. Hyde decided needed help to avoid capture. So he wrote to Lanyon in Jekyll's hand, asked his friend to bring chemicals from his lab. In Lanyon's presence, Hyde mixed the chemicals, drank the serum, and transformed into Jekyll. The shock of that sight killed Lanyon and led to his deterioration and death. Meanwhile, Jekyll's involuntary transformations increased in frequency. So he kept turning to Hyde just without any potion, any serum. He just kept doing it. They increased in frequency, and they required larger doses every time to turn him back. And it was one of these transformations that caused Jekyll to slam his window shut on Anderson when they were trying to talk him through the window. Eventually, the supply of salt used in the serum ran low, and these batches prepared from new stocks failed to work. So Jekyll speculated that the original ingredients that was used, or original salts in it, had impurities, which made it work. Realizing that he would stay transformed as Hyde forever, Jekyll wrote out a full account of the events, and Jekyll ends by saying he doesn't know if Hyde will be executed or if he'll find the balls to commit suicide. But he doesn't care, because Jekyll's dying, and whatever happens next happens to someone other than him. And that's how the story ends. So, we never learn what these urges are. We never learn them. So, did he want to bang chicks? Did he want to bang dudes? Did he want to do drugs? Did he want to kill people? Like, what did he want to do so bad that he had to go into such great lengths to do this? And that's what this real question of the story is. What evil things do people think about? What desires do they have? The age-old battle of sin, of evil. That's the real question. And there's many film and TV adaptations that try to delve into this, like what Jekyll really wants, and we're going to talk about them. There are many adaptations of Jekyll and Hyde in film, TV, comics, just so many different versions. So I had to phone a friend and help me talk about this. So it's one of my good friends. You probably have heard his voice before or heard of him before. I called up my boy Tyler. So give it up for Jonathan Tyler Patrick.
Hey,
ATP.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be back, and it's fun to talk about this.
Yes, like I was just recording this, and I was just like, you know what? I need to call up Tyler on this, see if he can be a part of it. So Jekyll and Hyde. So what I've talked about so far, Tyler, is basically, I talked about the novel. Like, have you ever read the whole novel?
I have.
Okay.
Long story short, it was one of the first books I read when my mom bought these like abridged illustrated classics.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like Tom Sawyer, Oliver Twist, Jekyll and Hyde, Treasure Island, and Jekyll and Hyde. I read that, and I had to be like third, fourth grade, and then closer to high school, I read the full book.
And then like A Walk to Remember, and notebooks like that.
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
You read one Nicholas Sparks book, they're all the same. You just change a couple of details.
They're not the same.
Dude, it's always
kidding me?
Someone falls in love, someone dies. I predicted one. We watched a trailer for a movie one day at work, and I predicted the whole book just from the trailer, and the girl went and saw it and came back like, "How did you know?" I'm like, "Because I know."
Was it Dear John?
No, it was the one that had James Marsden in it. I don't even remember which one that is, but
I don't know. A Walk to Marston.
A Walk to Dear John's Rodanthia.
The Notebook of Marston. I wish they would have let me play Cyclops longer. I wish I wasn't in Superman Returns. No. Poor guy. But that's a whole other podcast. That's the Krpyton Report. So dude. Have you seen? So the first film adaptation, like major adaptation of Jekyll and Hyde, was John Barrymore, ancestor of Drew Barrymore, and the 1920 silent film Jekyll and Hyde.
I've seen parts of it. I've seen clips because like just the transformation scenes and stuff were done so well. So like I haven't seen the whole film, but I have seen like the transformation.
Okay. See, that's important. That's good. So, like, as I was going through this list of, because I wanted to watch as many Jekyll and Hyde versions as I could to kind of talk about in this podcast with you, like, so many things I couldn't find streaming. Like,
Mhm.
I couldn't even find from the library. I couldn't, like, I tried to YouTube stuff. I tried to find anything I could, and the list was very limited. So I didn't get to see the Michael Caine version. I couldn't find the John Malkovich version with Julia Roberts,
Ooh, that's
which I think was
interesting.
like Mary Riley.
Yeah, it was all about her perspective.
Like that would have been very interesting. I really like wanted a part of that.
That's really
But I couldn't find it. Um, and I couldn't order anything from the library because I took out a giant like horror literature
Mhm.
encyclopedia, and Jen moved it and I forgot where it was. So the library's like, you got to return this freaking book because you owe us money. And I'm like, my wife
Gotcha.
works at the library. I owe you nothing. but but I had to return that, so I couldn't order anything. But what are you gonna do? So in this 1920s version, I'll go through with it here. I think Hyde looks the best. Like,
How do you
have you
prefer your
seen
hide?
pictures of this?
How do you prefer your hide? I think that's the first thing I want to
See,
ask you.
okay, because that's something I definitely wanted to get in with you. So I think just we'll sidebar that question in a second because like because in the book,
Mhm.
okay, so in the book, Hyde is so Jekyll is handsome. He's James Cole, basically.
Mm.
He's he's in his 50s, but he's a handsome dude. He's well built, well put together. And when he turns into Hyde, he becomes smaller and weaker. And not necessarily a hunchback, but like and the more he takes the potion, the more he gets disfigured, the more Jekyll is taken away from him. And his hair is very thin. His fingernails are longer. He has hairier arms, and as Utterson looks at him and people look at him in the book, they describe him as like he has a deformity, but they can't describe what that deformity is. And they look at him, but like nobody can describe what Hyde looks like almost like the potion gives off this aura or this like deception or
Mhm.
this filter, if you will, perception filter. It's which is kind of a Doctor Who thing, but but anywho, pun intended. Um, but like I like my hide personally. I like my hide to be more like this. I like my hide to have the longer fingernails. Like it doesn't make sense for me for hide to look so incredibly ridiculous and over the top. Like I think he needs
Mhm.
like a man that wouldn't necessarily be able to get a woman normally. Um, but I think he needs to be just like when you look at this dude, you don't want to mess with this dude. You don't want to mess with him. He creeps you out and he scares you.
Mm.
But because he's so like demanding and scary and forceful with his evil and his presence, you're going to do what he tells you to do because you're so scared of what he's going to do. And,
Mhm.
and we see that a bit in these movies of just how he speaks and how he treats people. Like I kind of like my hide like that, and we'll definitely talk more about that. Um, but in this movie, Hyde has long hair, like really greasy type long hair. His face is longer. He's skinnier, and I think he's played by a different actor in this one.
Would you do it that way, or would you have the same actor?
Um, Me personally, I like the same actor because not only am I giving that actor a chance to really show what he can do
Mhm.
and have that range, like I really liked, what the heck's his name, Frederick. What the hell is his name? Not necessarily Spencer Tracy, but Frederick. My things are out of order. Gosh.
Which year?
Frederick March. Frederick Mark won Academy Award for best actor in this when he on his 1931 version.
I'm looking at the pictures now.
Yeah, check it out. So
yeah.
The 1920s one. 1920s one.
I remember that one. Like I'm looking. I like the John Barrymore look.
Yeah,
because I really feel like the actor's stretching, but it's not that Hyde is an interesting person, but he's still a person compared to some of them where it's like he looks like an animal.
Well, yeah, we'll be getting to that in a second. But so in the book, like what really bothered me in the book, and I said this earlier, is that you don't really know what Jekyll wanted to do. Like you don't know his impulses. They never get into in the book. Like, I mean, all we know in the book is that Jekyll was a man about town. He was very respected. He was 50. He wasn't married. He had no children. But we don't really know what he wanted to do, like why he needed to create this Hyde persona. What did he want to pursue? So in the 1920s movie, we get this, like how the story goes here is basically Jekyll runs a free clinic and he works long hours and he has little time for his girlfriend Millicent. And Millicent's father is named Sir George, and he's irritated by Jekyll's like high mindedness. He thinks that Jekyll puts on this persona that he's too good. Like there's no way a man can be this good. So he says to Jekyll that you can't be as good as you look. So he takes him one night to basically like a bar. It takes him to a nightclub, and he says that every man is basically two parts and they're in constant conflict. And he says that man can't destroy the savage in him by denying his impulses. And the only way to get rid of temptation is to yield to it. So I found this really freaking weird. Like, this dude's going to marry your daughter. Why are you taking him to a nightclub and basically saying, like, hey, if you see a chick and you want to bang her, like, do it, just so you can, like, deal with your impulses. But he meets this woman named Gina, and this is where things kind of get different for Jekyll. So he's based on what his future father-in-law says, he starts researching a way that he can separate good and evil, and he creates a potion and it transfers him into Hyde. And then he creates a counter potion to turn back into Jekyll.
I always found that fascinating.
Which part?
He had to create a second potion to turn back.
I like that.
I do too.
I think it's interesting to have it deliberately that like Hyde has to choose to go back to Jekyll as much as Jekyll has to choose to turn into Hyde.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I find that fascinating, and I'm glad you put that up, because in most interpretations, it's basically Jekyll chooses to turn to Hyde, and then Hyde just turns into Jekyll by circumstance.
Mm-hmm. It's like it wears off.
Yeah, and I kind of would like.
I like the idea they need each other.
Yeah. Yes, my man. So basically, they do that story of like this girl and like nightclub stuff. And then they do a story where basically Hyde takes this Gina and moves her into an apartment and kind of like basically takes care of her. And in the silent film, like it's not as toned up and scariness. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of how that story goes. But in the 1931 film, this is where I feel Hyde is absolutely freaking terrifying. And he's not terrifying because he looks like a monkey. He's terrifying by how he acts. So this is where I feel that the look of Hyde takes a dramatic step backwards. Because now, have you seen the 1931 one?
I have seen this one.
Okay, so
I think this is the most famous version, like in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you're totally right. It's definitely the most famous version. I don't like Hyde looking like a simian.
Nope.
Or Mr. Peepers, like Chris Kattan's character in SNL. Like,
I knew he reminded me of somebody, and it wasn't coming.
Like, that's what I was getting, man. And he jumps around like a monkey. It's so weird. They basically take the story from the 1920 version, but they kind of up it. So it's kind of cut and paste. But Henry Jekyll is extremely horny, like we can tell. Like, he wants to get some. And in this case, his future father-in-law wants to delay the wedding to his girlfriend longer. And Jekyll and her really want to get married. Probably because Jekyll's horny. so they go, he's walking about town one night and he runs into this nightclub chick named Ivy. And basically Ivy is being attacked by some dudes. Jekyll saves her. Ivy seduces him and kind of flirts with him a little bit. Jekyll refuses, but when he takes this Hyde serum, he goes after Ivy and basically like meets her at the nightclub and says, I will financially support you in return for your company. And this is where the movie gets so freaking uncomfortable, because he basically, I mean, they don't show it, thank God, but he basically rapes this woman like repeatedly and psychologically manipulates her that you're nothing without me. Like, I have to financially support you. He abuses her. He shakes her. The way he talks to her, like, as you're watching this movie, you think he's just going to kill her, like, at any moment. Like, it's quite uncomfortable, but it made Hyde be this like really evil dude. And eventually in the movie he does kill Ivy, and he does and then he does kill Ivy eventually, and he breaks off the engagement with his fiance, and he just because he can't control the transformations, so he basically just dies that way. Like, do you, Tyler, like, do you like Hyde to be this like woman abuser? Like what do you think Jekyll's motive should be to become Hyde?
See, the problem with this is you're asking me a question, what do I think? But I'm also thinking, like, what would I do if I were to interpret this into a film? And I feel like that's two different. I feel like that's two different answers.
No. That's near the end of the podcast. I already got that.
So I'm like, I think it's interesting that we don't really know Jekyll's motives. Because of course, the book is told mostly through the book is through Poole. Yeah.
Well, Anderson.
Yeah.
So it was so the book is like, if us being best pals, if you started acting funny and I record the events of what the heck was going on.
Exactly. So I think having his motives kind of hidden works really well in the book. Of course, when you do the film, you're doing it more first person.
Sure.
And as far as the women abuser thing, I try to look at it in context maybe of when it was made, the years, like what the message is, what the cultural relevance might be of creating this character like this. I mean, when was women's suffrage? I'm trying to think, like,
it's funny you say that, because so the next movie to kind of have Jekyll and Hyde in there is Abbott and Costello meet Jekyll and Hyde, and Jekyll is played by Boris Karloff, and in that movie they talk about suffrage.
See, I knew, because I saw that one, because of course I love my Abbott and Costello.
Yes, and I love Boris Karloff.
I mean, that's a win-win-win.
Well, I felt the movie was a little poor. It could have been better.
I agree, but it's still fun. Like, it's one of those, like, even the bad Abbott Costello still brings a smile to your face.
Fair enough.
But I mean, as far as the women abuser, I think it works if you're looking at Hyde as being this more the opposite, a darker and more evil, and it also makes you wonder, like, Dr. Jekyll is not married, and is Hyde an escape for urges and feelings and things that he wishes he could do in this proper Victorian society, but Hyde is the extreme of those feelings, those emotions. So, Jekyll wishes he could just be with women, without the restrictions of society. Well, Hyde takes it too far to where he becomes too dominant, that he then becomes an abuser. So,
yeah, I think you're spot on there. Like each movie interpretation is kind of based on the times that you want to do that story.
I think that's why it's so relatable too, of just the duality of our natures, that you can always put that little twist on it.
No, I'm with you. Have you seen Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde?
No.
Okay. I started watching it. It was still on Peacock, and I started watching it, and it felt like I was watching what the heck's that director's name? They did Full Metal Jacket, Clockwork Orange.
What
the heck's his name?
I feel bad. Oh my god.
What's wrong with us?
You put me on the spot. It's like mental math. I'm sick. Oh my god, Stanley Kubrick.
Thank you. Mr. Shining, Mr. Come on, G. So I felt like I was watching a Kubrick do a Hammer film.
It looks like a Hammer film.
Yeah, it's very much like a Hammer film. So the thing's interesting about it is basically, like, Jekyll lives alone. He keeps to himself very much. A new girl moves in upstairs in his building, and like it's basically gives the concept that women are good, and when women give off the ability to, like, kind of live forever, if you will, like the grace of women and stuff, like, and women have good in them. It's a weird film, and basically, like, I turned it off when he changed into the woman and he just started rubbing his tits. Like, I just was really freaking weird to me. So, I mean, I understand. Like, if you have no woman in your life,
but the thing is, your mindset would change too. That'd be like Jekyll in Hyde's body, not a new person. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That would be more like a Freaky Friday kind of thing.
But it wasn't very good. But a version that was pretty decent was written by Steve Moffat in 2006. And did you get to see the show?
That is the one that you and I have talked about, that I want to see, that I will see one day, because Steve Moffat is very unique. We talked about it even more when we talked about Dracula.
Yes.
And I just have not had the chance. But I'm more than open to hearing
spoilers. Spoilers. Okay. So in this version, I don't know, try to sum it up in a way that makes sense, because it's 6 episodes. Each episode is an hour long. And as it goes, they reveal a little bit by bit to the story. There are aspects of this story that just don't freaking make sense, and they reveal it kind of in the last moment, but they leave it hanging. But then there's aspects of it that they reveal things, and they're like, okay, this is very interesting, but they don't touch upon it. Like, they kind of leave it open, like if they ever did a sequel. So basically, to kind of put this in the most simplest terms, to sum it up. So James Nesbitt plays a guy named Tom Jackman. And Tom Jackman, when he was a baby, he was left at a fire department. No one knows who his parents are. Like nobody knows anything. And he grew up and he became a doctor and everything was fine. He meets his wife at a dinner party between mutual friends, and she's not really like interested in him too much, but um eventually like he kind of wins her charm and they flirt with each other. They have a very sexual relationship. um like
Naturally.
she's a bit of a freak, um and like he doesn't mind. And she tells her friend while they're on the honeymoon over the phone that when they're getting busy, that she makes his eyes turn black.
Interesting.
And she's and like her friend's like, that's not even freaking possible. Like no guy can make his, like you can't do that. She's like, well, I do it. So we see a little bit of that. Then after they get off the phone, Jackman's getting him and his wife, ice cream, and these guys go up to her and start harassing her and like hitting on her, and it's very uncomfortable. Almost like, hey, girl, we want to take you and rape you. Tom comes with the ice cream, and basically the guys make fun of him, like, what the hell are you going to do? They take his ice cream and they put it on his head, embarrass him. And then they say, are you the type of husband that is going to allow this? And he's just like scared. And he's like, yes. And they say, are you the type of husband that's going to allow this? And they take the ice cream, and the attacker, or the creep, puts it on her boobs. Like he takes the ice cream on her boobs, and then he licks the ice cream off her tit, like completely embarrassing her. Like it's very uncomfortable. And Tom doesn't do anything, but as it's happening, his eyes start turning black a little bit. And they go to a restaurant later in the night, and they're dressed nice, and his wife's trying to get a table, and she's like, I don't want you to be the type of guy that's going to be all violent. Like, I don't want you to be that guy. I want the guy I married, that's good. And he looks out the window and he sees these bullies off in the distance. And as he's in the restaurant, he turns to hide for the first time. And he goes out and he beats the living crap out of these guys. And to the attacker, when there's clips of Hyde. So when he turns to Hyde, his curly hair becomes more black and like slick back. And they say that he's taller and he's thinner and he looks younger. But you don't really see that. You just see the hair kind of dyed and his eyes are black. And they make things to make him appear taller.
Okay.
But also in close-ups, he has like fangs. Like almost like he's somewhat cannibalistic, like very animal-like. And he basically almost kills these guys, and he rips off the dude's ear, like bites it off. And and then he's like disappears for a bit, and she finds him in a hospital, and he has the ear like in a coat pocket in his jacket. And he's like, something's really wrong. So to sum this up a little bit better, he gets her pregnant, and when she gives birth, the baby only has one heartbeat. But as she's giving birth, the doctor says, you have twins. Do twins run in your family? And he says, no. And the doctor's like, well, you're having the second kid any minute now. And they say, but the doctor said there's only one heartbeat. Very interesting stuff. I wish they would have touched a little bit more on it. But but they say basically they have two sons. One's name's Eddie, one's named something else. And yeah. So Tom disappears he was just like, as he's making these changes to Hyde in certain instances, he disappears. He hires this like psychiatric nurse, and he has a relationship with Hyde where they talk through a tape recorder. They have a set of rules, yada yada. And his wife doesn't know what he's doing, so she hires a private detective. And the private detective basically works for Hyde's mom, and or Jekyll's mom. And basically there's a secret organization that's hunting him, and they've been watching him forever. And they say that Jekyll had no living descendants. So there's a theory that Jackman is a clone from the original Jekyll.
Oh, wow.
And that's how he came to be, that they took his DNA. But then they flipped the script, and it's revealed that Jekyll was a personal friend of Robert Louis Stevenson.
Okay.
And he met with Robert Louis Stevenson and basically said, this is a real story. This is what really happened. And you can write about it, but there's a certain bit of rules to it. And Robert Louis Stevenson basically says, before I write this, I think I know the secret of your potion. And I just want to see if I'm right. So he writes down a piece of paper, and then he shows it to Jekyll, and Jekyll's acts like basically it's correct, and then throws in the fire. And that's how the story came to be. So Jekyll was a real guy in 1886 Edinburgh, had no descendants, but it's like the book really happened. So Hyde had bastard children around London and banged everybody, but Jekyll had no kids. So those descendants of Hyde is where Jackman came to be.
Nice.
And he's not a clone. But the secret that Lewis wrote on there was that there's no potion. That there's no potion that turns him into Hyde. That he actually turned to Hyde when he met the maid. And his sexual impulses for the maid is what made him create a split personality. And that's kind of where it goes a little crazy. So the secret organization, in order to get the blood of Hyde, that somehow has superpowers like super speed, super strength, can climb up buildings. It makes no sense. Moffat kind of like forget it or whatever. It's all left field. It doesn't explain it, but basically they cloned the maid, and the maid is his wife. So there is a clone, and they needed his wife and clone to be there to meet with Jackman so that they could release Hyde in modern day to be able to create this Hyde army, whatever. So basically it wraps up that Hyde gets shot, and then they end up sharing the same mind, and Hyde has the ability to go through memories of every Hyde that there ever was. And that's kind of interesting. And Hyde basically sacrificed himself to save the family and save the kids. And the interesting thing that they kind of wrap it up with is that the kids are captured and they're put into these like chambers, and the mom's like, how did you guys survive that long? Like, aren't you claustrophobic like your dad? And the boys say to her that when we got bored or we felt we couldn't breathe, we just switched places. And she's like, what the hell are you talking about? And he's like, well, we just switched places, Mom. Implying that these two boys, they can separate their consciousness and switch places in bodies. So one day
That's heavy, man. For like one show.
Right?
For like that's.
But they don't do anything with it. Like, there's even a part in one of the episodes where the organization's trying to take one of the kids, try and take Eddie, like Eddie Hyde,
Yeah.
and Hyde and Jekyll turns to Hyde and kills a lion because they take this kid, they throw the kid in the lion enclosure at a zoo, and he
Wow.
becomes Hyde and kills this lion. And like, I thought that the way this show went was not how I expected, because I thought it would be about the kids.
Mm-hmm.
That like they wanted the kids because one of them is pure good and one of them is pure evil. And the fact that they leave on this cliffhanger that the boys can at any moment change their consciousness into the other body, that's interesting. Like, I'm like, that's never been done with Jekyll and Hyde.
I mean, that's extensive. I mean, you could say that about almost every beat in this show.
Yeah,
Like, that's not been done before.
I know, I'm just going blah, blah, blah at you, but like,
It's a lot.
There's a lot of parts, and I would love to talk about it when you see it, but like, so going on more about Hyde. Hyde often is like a Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
So getting into the nitty gritty, the most recent stuff here, Leave Australian Gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts?
That Hyde was too crazy. Like,
Thank
he was. And we're looking at the film, not the comic book, because I don't remember the Hyde in the comic book because it's been so long.
I really need to finish those comics. I'm with you.
It just was a huge, massive, like, deformed person. Like, he couldn't pass in society. That was the part about Hyde, was like he could pass as a person, like maybe a little rough around the edges and like looks like he needs a shower and stuff, but he
Except
still
when
looks
you
like
make him a monkey man.
Yeah. So the Hyde that they used in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was just ridiculous.
Like, it's almost like he looks almost like James just skipped leg day for like 15 years. Like, he's so top heavy.
And then was trying to play a hunchback for a production of Frankenstein.
Exactly. Like, he's a mixture of the hunchback. His arms are huge. His whole top's huge. His legs are really skinny. Like, they don't use complete CGI on him. Like, they blew whatever budget they could use. Like, on his transformations aren't bad. Because his transformation is like a poof of smoke, and then he's like,
Yeah,
that's not bad. The character Jekyll was pretty good. Like, Jekyll was done okay. But like, it's almost, because this movie came out like right after Ang Lee's Hulk.
Yeah.
And it's like they wanted him to be like the Hulk, and that's intentional, but he just looks so weird. And then we get to Van Helsing's Hyde, and he's still a Hulk, but I think that Hyde looks a lot better.
I mean, yeah, it's cruder CG, but yeah,
Sure.
The thing, they tried to make that Hyde like comical, like where they have like he's got the cigar and he's big and he's crawling around like almost like a monkey, swinging, and his pants are falling. We see like his butt crack a little bit. They try to make him, scary. And then I forgot. Did you remember they tried to do Russell Crowe as Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde?
That's the next thing we're talking
about. I totally forgot that one. So right now.
No, dude. So like, I just want to touch on how Hollywood once wanted Hyde to be this big hulking monster to kind of take from the Hulk. The Hulk took from Jekyll and Hyde, and now Jekyll and Hyde's trying to take from Hulk back.
Yeah, it's reciprocal. Like, it's interesting like that.
Yes, it's just, but the one Hyde that really doesn't work for me was Russell Crowe's Hyde.
It was just weird. I
watched the scene right before we started talking tonight. Like, his Hyde is just like red eyes, veins in the face. That's it. His voice is good. I will give him that. His voice, the Cockney accent stuff, I like that. But had the Dark Universe went on, Tyler, do you think that Hyde? What do you think that would have happened with that Hyde, man?
I think we would have seen it more, and they might have advanced it more because the way they try to produce it in the movies, like he hadn't done it a while.
Mhm.
So I think they would have gave us a little bit more depth. So
Do you think that they would have made him more Hulk-like eventually?
probably because they seem to do everything horrible in the way they were setting up that dark universe.
well, they ended it right after that first movie. That was it. Okay, so now into like a bit more interesting talk here. Okay, so Jekyll and Hyde, and I talked about this kind of in the beginning of the podcast. I probably should have just had you on the whole freaking podcast. I
It's all
apologize,
good.
but I
It's
didn't
all
want
good.
you sitting there while I rambled about so much stuff. but I talked earlier in the podcast about the theories of Sigmund Freud,
That's smart.
and well, it's me. I mean, come on, it's me. But remember, like years ago, you and I had this conversation about how we're kind of obsessed with the concept of duality.
Hell yeah, we did. And
And
we still do.
and we still do. And I threw at you without even looking at Sigmund Freud's theories, without even thinking about it. I threw at you that I think that there's three people in everybody,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, "Oh, that's intriguing." And then we became friends, and like you became really gay for me because because I'm such a deep thinker. It's understandable. I'm awesome.
You would,
But
but you are awesome.
thanks, buddy. So I ended up looking more into this mainly, for my comic and all this stuff. And in the last days of Sigmund Freud, he had this theory, and basically what he said was that there are three voices in our head, just like I said to you. And I swear I didn't look up this theory, or maybe I did when I was a kid, and when I first came up with this concept, sitting with Jure in high school. But I swear to you, I forgot about it. I didn't know about it. But Sigmund Freud basically said that there's three voices in our head. There's the ID or the id.
Mm-hmm.
There's the ego, and there's the superego. So the ID seeks pleasure. It's what you really want. It's your deepest desires and impulses. You're a Mr. Hyde, if you will. The superego is the part of you that wants to uphold your highest values. The Dr. Jekyll in you, the superhero in you, like the best you can be, the 100% good part of you. And then there's the ego. And the ego is the one that society basically is telling you that this is the way you need to be. So the ego is your balance, who you really are. And that's the theory that I put in my comic is that like you're Tyler.
Yep.
And you have three names, which makes this perfect for you. So
it does.
There's Tyler, the man that's just living the everyday life. Then there's one that's the absolute best of the best part of Tyler, and that's Jonathan. And Jonathan's the good. Then there's Patrick, and Patrick's out there banging whores and slashing tires. And he goes to the gas station and he's like, I'll put 50 on 3. Gives the $50 bill, and then he just takes it back. And, while someone was already pumping gas. Like, I don't even know that's not really possible.
Doesn't pay for a stick.
But I was just thinking of stupidest things.
Just takes his cherry coke and runs.
That's right. But there's three parts of this. And like, I think that's a real fascinating part. And that honestly, us being superhero nerds, like I even mentioned earlier that like Jekyll and Hyde is really kind of almost that basis for superheroes and villains.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you're the 3-person thing, is how I always describe Superman.
Yeah.
So I always say that it's like I use the term professionalism. Like Clark Kent is more like him being professional. Like there's him in the middle, who he really is. But then like Clark is more like certain characteristics, certain way he perceives himself. And then Superman is like being the professional, like the best, all of your best characteristics, a certain way that you carry yourself, like you have to do, like when you're at work, and you're interacting with your coworkers, you have a set of rules and everything. But who he really is right there in the middle. The Clark after work, not the one that he shows everyone to help create the secret identity. So
How would you say Bruce Wayne is?
Bruce Wayne is too. Like, I always think that he's either Batman or the persona of Bruce Wayne.
Like they're like, yeah, it's like Bruce is the super. Bruce is the ego. Like, this is what society, like how I need to be. But then Batman is like straight up. Batman is mostly the Batman personality is mostly the ID and the super ego together, because he will use he'll like whoop your ass, but he does it for good reasons. Um so like very interesting part. I like in going in Batman, like with Two-Face directly comes from Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
I think what's interesting about Two-Face, and as we talked about, duality is my favorite because we talked about this when we did the Wolfman, and then with Two-Face.
Yeah.
But my thing with Two-Face is he's like Jekyll and Hyde in one body, though.
Yeah.
To where he doesn't have the choice of it really is a representation of the two sides warring with each other. And I think sometimes Two-Face is a character that some writers haven't been able to really nail. They don't understand the character enough to really nail it down. Because Scott Snyder touched on this a little bit. Two-Face is a character that can actually do good. If the coin goes that way, he could actually be doing good. So he really is at the same time at war with himself. Because I think the best Two-Face story and the Two-Face concept that I've been working on for a story is a person who's lost the ability to make a choice.
Can't wait to see that movie.
So he's really lost his ability to choose something. He can't decide. So that's where the coin really plays into it. And the choices is what determines, his actions. So I think where we talked about Jekyll and Hyde earlier, needing to make the choice to become each other for whatever reasons, taking the potion or the reverse potion, Two-Face, his potion is the coin. So, and like I said, it's both people represented in one body at the same time.
See, that's what I really loved about old school Two-Face stories, is that he would flip that coin, like, and say it came up scarred.
Mm-hmm.
Then he would be like, okay, I'm going to rob a bank. And then he would ask, what am I going to do with this money? What's my next step? Flip the coin and it comes out good. And he's like, okay, I'm going to donate this money to the homeless.
Yep.
Like, so that's what made, for me, Two-Face such a fascinating character. And also, like, Bruce being friends with Harvey and seeing this change in him. Bruce being the Dr. Utterson, if you will. So as I was like studying this, I was thinking in my head how I would do like a new Dr. Jekyll story and stuff. And like, me, I freaking love the Hulk. So the Hulk's its own thing. I love the concept. I mean, I freaking love Hulk. But I think what I love the most about Hulk is, and then I'll go back to talk about Two-Face. I apologize. but
No, you're fine.
But I think what I love the most about Hulk is that Bruce didn't want that.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about Al Ewing's Immortal Hulk so much, and all these different personalities, and Peter David's take on the Hulk. I love that Hulk has adapted, that he does have DID, he does have dissociative identity disorder. He has all these different personalities in him that he has created for different points in his life. Like Joe Fixit is how he sees a man should be. And and the Devil Hulk is the father figure, the protector of Bruce, like he in that personality. And Hulk or Incredible Hulk is the lashing out baby, the childish, the personification of all his pain and all his anger and all the crap he has to deal with. And that's why it's just like, Hulk smash. I just think that that's so fascinating. But all in all, Bruce wants freaking peace. He doesn't want these things to get out. He doesn't, I mean, he kind of like, he wants to be able to live his life and people take him serious and like not look at him like a joke. But like, he doesn't want to hurt anybody in the process of them thinking like that. Go ahead. You look like you want to say something. Go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking like I'm thinking about like everything you're presenting and just kind of refining my pitch idea of what I would do if I had to, like if my task, if they came to me like, hey, we want to do a new Jekyll and Hyde movie, like what would,
let's just go right into it. Cause that's how I was going to wrap this up. Like how would, so
I would borrow.
How would you do a new Jekyll and Hyde story for modern times and do it right? Boom.
I would borrow from something that was based off Jekyll and Hyde, and that'd be the Nutty Professor.
I did want to mention the Nutty Professor, but I totally forgot about it.
So my Jekyll will be a very plain, ordinary, socially awkward person.
Okay.
But not like extreme nerdy. He's just very plain. Nothing, middle-aged.
How did I skip over the Nutty Professor in my notes? What the hell is wrong with me? I had it.
The idea is he wants to be more attractive and everything. And what it would be was he would create the serum that turns into Hyde, but Hyde would be the idea, like he would be a very attractive man, slimmer in physical, a little bit muscular.
So you're thinking Jerry Lewis, Nutty Professor?
Yes, that's where I would start.
The best version, in my opinion, better than a Murphy version.
It is.
Sorry.
But the idea is that Hyde is an attractive guy, but he is a most disgusting person on the inside. So he would be a women abuser. He would be a manipulator. He would be a user. Everything that makes people disgusting on the inside is what he would be. And you would have a subtle message about how we perceive goodness by the physical appearance and not by our actions. So the idea is you would kind of start small. Like he would turn into Hyde. He would have some, and it would be like a side effect. He wanted to make himself, better, but he becomes another person. And you would do like them talking to each other similar, but he goes out as Hyde. The first night he hooks up with some girl. And then the next night he wants to be Hyde again. And he takes the potion, and Hyde only turns back to Jekyll. I'm trying to work it, but maybe because he needs to like hide, like he disappeared because he commits a crime, and the idea is that then each time Jekyll turns back to Hyde, Hyde becomes more aggressive, more so like it goes from him being able to hook up with the girl to then him abusing the next girl, like the next night, and becomes sadistic. And it would follow the book, it would be, I would try to actually map out the book, but my difference was Hyde would be a disgustingly evil person on the inside. And that perspective would shift, Jekyll turns into Hyde because of the pleasure centers that gets filled, that he can still, when he wakes up the next day as Jekyll, he still has like the feelings and kind of, memories, so to speak, of the experience, but then he starts to realize what's going on. And yeah, that's kind of where I would take it. Like, I think I would just play with that and not make Hyde this monstrous person. His monstrosity would come from just his actions and who he is.
Okay. So to play on what you said, and what I've already thought, I think so, because they did that Joker movie, and the Joker movie was based on mental health, really, and then they just turned to Joker. I think this is how I would do a Two-Face movie. I think, or new Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing. I think I would do a Two-Face movie. And I think you like this. Okay. So I think I would do a little mixture of the Jekyll and Hyde story, but also Long Halloween. Because I love that Batman story.
Mhm.
But I would have Bruce basically be the Utterson of it, and the Utterson of the story, like watching his friend become this thing. So I would just name it Dent.
Dude, that's what I named my story.
You just named your story Dent?
Yeah, my script is Dent. That's the title.
God damn it, dude. Okay, I would name it Dented.
We'll workshop it.
We'll workshop it. I'll put my best people on it. So it would be amazing. Amazing. But yes, the title Dent would be the best way to go.
It would be.
Or maybe I'll just name it. Maybe I'll name mine Coin or I don't know. But basically what I was thinking in my head is we tell this whole story of Harvey Dent, from growing up and a child and stuff, but we kind of do it from Bruce's perspective
Mhm.
of him meeting Harvey, him being friends with Harvey, and then eventually, Harvey gets engaged. Harvey's going for the DA job, and there's all this pressure on him. But in the middle of it, Harvey has in his mind, that he has Big Bad for Harvey in his mind, and we get this, this murder mystery, like mobsters are dying, whatever. But and I'm going to workshop it. I'll put my best people
Mhm.
on it. But the final scene, so the whole movie, he is switching between Harvey and Dent and stuff. But the final scene is is he goes so crazy. Like he goes so crazy from like accusations and everything going on. I was gonna have him tear at his face
Ooh.
and
Ooh, scarring
like
himself
seriously
would
like
be
just start tearing at his face, and then the end scene is him being Two-Face and scarred his own face.
nice.
That's what I had in my mind.
I like it.
Well, thanks.
I
I
like
mean,
it.
it's not as good as Dent, or the title Dent,
Well,
but that's
like
what I would do.
my story is just about a moral ambiguous young hotshot attorney
Yeah.
who goes where he doesn't care if his clients are either way, and the idea is he basically the big bad heart persona is kind of something he had as a kid to help. He was always picked on for being weak and everything, and he kind of created it to help protect himself. But the idea is he loses his ability to make a choice. Like he can't choose what is right and what is wrong anymore. And then that's where the coin really plays into
So are you
his.
gonna have it be like are you gonna have it be like a big event happens where he made the wrong choice,
I don't know
and
yet.
that's why he's so frozen about making choices?
I have a couple of ideas, and I'm working on what I like most. So it's working. But it's just like
Your concept is very good.
so's yours. I like the ending scene of just like it's powerful. The imagery is powerful.
Like I don't even know if I'm gonna do he just starts doing it with like sharp metal. I don't know, and he makes the coin out of that. I don't know, whatever. But like I just have this image in my head with him just like digging into his face, like he just um
I
just
like
doing
it.
that. So yeah, so Jekyll
We
and
could talk
Hyde,
forever about like because there has been so many versions of Jekyll and Hyde. Like there's a lot. There's the Dr. Jekyll Miss Hyde we joked about with Tim Daly. Um, there's a lot of versions of this story, but the common it's about good and evil in all of us.
and sin,
Sin.
and go to
Sinners.
church. um, so I think it's pretty plain and simple that your favorite interpretation of a Jekyll and Hyde thing is Two-Face. Mine, of course, is the Hulk, like hands down. No, nothing about that. Tyler, I want to thank you for kind of like wrapping up this podcast and this discussion here, talking about good and evil and split personalities and stuff. I know you're a busy man, but I thank you for coming and helping me for this last hour.
Anytime, buddy. Anytime. I love it. You know that.
I know, buddy. And like, we'll have to do more discussion next time.
I'm in.
So this is the there's one more episode this season of Gravely Amusing, listeners, where I'm going to talk on basically the monsters coming together. Maybe Tyler will join me on that. Maybe some other people will. I want to definitely put it out before Thanksgiving. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if Tyler can join me. But basically, I'm going to talk about Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, Monster Squad, and Van Helsing. These movies that all the monsters come together for Thanksgiving. But
that would be awesome.
That would be so awesome.
Thanksgiving with the monsters.
But thank you for being with me here tonight, Tyler, and thank you for being with me tonight, listeners. I hope you were thrilled. I hope you were horrified. And if nothing else, I hope you were gravely amused. Good night, everybody.